The first thing Ryland Cross noticed after regaining consciousness was that the floor was warm. Not metaphorically warm, not emotionally warm, actually warm, as if the surface beneath him was gently regulating his body temperature without asking permission. The second thing he noticed was that he was very definitely not dead, which felt like a clerical error he did not intend to correct aloud. He opened one eye, then the other, and was greeted by a ceiling that moved. Not collapsed, moved. Veins of light flowed through it in slow, deliberate patterns, as though the structure itself was breathing. Ryland groaned softly and attempted to sit up. Invisible pressure pushed him back down with the firmness of a disappointed instructor. "Right," he muttered. "Captured again. I really need a new hobby." The last clear memory he had was the border run, routine reconnaissance along a contested stretch of space no one officially claimed, but everyone unofficially wanted. Sensors had gone quiet too fast. Then the flash, then darkness. Now warmth, soft light, and the unsettling feeling that he was being observed by something very patient. A translucent barrier dissolved near his head, and a figure stepped into view. Humanoid, tall, pale skin, almost white, contrasted sharply with long black hair pulled back in a severe arrangement. And then Ryland noticed the ears, longer than human, tapering elegantly backward, not decorative, not ceremonial, functional. "Well," he said hoarsely, "this is new." The figure regarded him without surprise. Her eyes were dark, focused, ancient in a way that suggested she had seen many men wake up exactly like this. She wore no visible armor, yet the air around her felt structured, controlled, as if violence was a decision she could make with a gesture rather than a weapon. "You are conscious sooner than predicted," she said. Her voice was calm, resonant, carried by unseen harmonics. "That is efficient." "Story of my life," Ryland replied. "Could we skip to the part where you tell me whether I'm a prisoner, a guest, or a very confused corpse?" A pause, not irritation, calculation. "You are a detainee under border violation statutes," she said. "Execution has been suspended." Ryland exhaled. "Suspended is good. I like suspended. Suspended sounds temporary." Another pause, longer this time. "You will be presented before the throne." That was less good. They did not bind his hands. That worried him more than restraints would have. Instead, the room unfolded around him, walls sliding apart like petals, revealing a corridor that seemed grown rather than built. The floor adjusted to his steps, correcting his balance when he stumbled, which offended his pride more than his injuries. He was escorted by sentinels who did not speak, did not blink often enough, and carried weapons that hummed softly, as if bored. Ryland tried conversation anyway. Silence, it turned out, was their strongest language. The throne hall was immense, not grand in the human sense. No gold, no banners, but alive. Columns pulsed faintly with energy. The air itself felt archived, layered with history. At the far end sat a figure identical to the woman who had addressed him earlier, only older in posture if not appearance. Pale skin, black hair, long ears, authority woven into every still breath. Queen Visara. Ryland knew the name. Everyone did. You didn't scout contested borders without learning who ruled the other side. He stopped where the floor subtly insisted he stop. "Human," the queen said, "you trespassed into sovereign space." "Unintentionally," Ryland said. "My ship and I had a disagreement." A ripple of amusement passed through the chamber. Not laughter, recognition. The queen leaned forward slightly. "By our laws, you should not leave this world alive." "Ah," Ryland said, "there it is." "But," Queen Visera continued, "our laws are old, and they allow for alternatives." He waited, very carefully. "My daughter is widowed," she said. "By ancient covenant, her union must be renewed to preserve the balance of our empire." Ryland blinked once, then again. "I feel," he said slowly, "that I may have missed a step." The queen's gaze sharpened, and for the first time, something like weariness showed through the ritual precision. "You will marry her," she said, "and in doing so, you will live." Silence stretched. Rylan broke it with a quiet, incredulous laugh. You know, I've been captured before, he said. Interrogated, threatened. Once someone tried to sell me as livestock. But this is a first. The queen did not smile. There is no other choice. They did not give him a cell. That was the first detail Rylan noticed after the throne hall dissolved behind him, and the floor carried him, quite literally, away. The surface beneath his boots shifted, guiding his steps without physical force, like a polite but unyielding suggestion. He expected bars, fields, at least something that screamed incarceration. Instead, he was led into a suite that overlooked a living city spiraling upward and downward at the same time. Layers of architecture folding around a central shaft of pale light that stretched into the sky. Ah, Raylan murmured. The luxury hostage package. The door did not close. It simply decided he was inside now and became a wall. He paced, tested boundaries, confirmed that escape was a theoretical concept at best. The walls responded to his touch with gentle resistance, warm and faintly vibrating, like muscle beneath skin. Everything here was alive, or pretending very convincingly to be alive. That unsettled him more than weapons ever did. A moment later, no announcement, no warning, the air shifted. She stood near the window as if she had always been there. Rylan stopped short, one hand half raised in a defensive reflex that made no sense this far inside alien territory. She turned slowly, movements precise but not stiff, and for the first time since waking on the warm floor, he forgot to make a joke. Lyneth looked human enough that his brain tried to categorize her that way out of habit. Pale skin, soft features, dark eyes. Then the differences surfaced. Not exaggerated, not monstrous. The long ears curved back elegantly from her head, subtle but unmistakable. Her posture carried a restraint that felt practiced, learned over years of choosing silence instead of command. She wore simple garments, layered fabric that caught the light like woven circuitry. No crown, no visible rank. I was told you would be louder, she said. Rylan cleared his throat. Give me time. She almost smiled. Almost. I am Lyneth, she said, daughter of Queen Visara. Yes, Rylan said. About that, I feel we should address the part where your mother threatened my life and then proposed to me in the same sentence. Lyneth tilted her head slightly, studying him. She did not threaten you. She stated a condition. That condition being marriage, he said, which is bold, efficient, slightly traumatic. A quiet sound escaped her then, not laughter exactly, but something close. The tension in the room eased by a fraction. You are not what I expected either, Lyneth said. Human records describe your kind as rigid. We prefer adaptable, Rylan replied. Rigid is just what happens when you stop adapting. She gestured toward a seating structure that grew from the floor at her motion. He sat carefully, as if it might retract and swallow him out of spite. I did not ask for this, she said, her voice lowering. Nor did you. That makes us aligned, if nothing else. Rylan nodded slowly. I appreciate honesty, especially the kind that doesn't end with, and then we execute you anyway. Her gaze softened at that, though something heavy lived behind it. My previous union was necessary, she said. He was a good man, a loyal one. But loyalty does not stop time. Rylan let the silence exist. He had learned long ago that filling every quiet moment was a defensive habit, not a kindness. The Empire believes my remarriage will stabilize certain projections, Lyneth continued. You are an anomaly in those projections, unaligned, unpredictable. Unpredictable is my strongest skill, he said, right after poor life choices. Another almost smile. Outside the window, a massive structure drifted past, a starship grown rather than assembled, its surface pulsing gently as if responding to unseen currents. Smaller craft moved around it like fish around a whale. This place, Rylan said, gesturing vaguely, it's incredible, terrifying, but incredible. It is failing, Lyneth said simply. Slowly, quietly, the worst kind. He looked back at her, really looked. Not a queen, not a symbol, a woman carrying a future she did not choose. So, he said carefully, what happens now? She met his eyes, and this time there was no calculation in her expression. only resolve edged with something dangerously close to hope. Now, Lineth said, we decide whether this arrangement remains a sentence or becomes something survivable. Rylan leaned back, exhaled, and gave a crooked smile. Well, he said, I've survived worse first dates. Rylan learned 3 things about Vesseran culture within the first cycle of enforced orientation. First, nothing was ever officially called an orientation. Second, everything was recorded. Third, the walls had opinions. He stood in a circular chamber where the air shimmered with layered projections, symbols, figures, fragments of recorded history unfolding in 3 dimensions around him. A thin band of light hovered near his temple, pulsing softly as it translated directly into his neural interface. It was invasive in the way polite things often were. Please refrain from sarcasm, said the voice. It did not come from anywhere specific. It interferes with interpretive accuracy. I'll try, Rylan said. No promises. Sarcasm is how my species processes fear. The light pulsed once, as if offended. The chamber responded by rearranging itself. Images shifted to show ancient assemblies, long-eared figures standing in precise formations, while luminous constructs hovered above them, recording votes, judgments, destinies. Lineth stood a short distance away, watching quietly, hands folded, her posture suggesting she had endured this ritual more times than she cared to remember. These are the legal archives, she said. They are not advisors. They are law. Rylan squinted as a construct drifted closer, its surface rippling with unreadable data. So, living laws? Evolving, Lineth corrected. They adapt. Slowly, painfully. That sounds familiar, he said. On Earth we call that bureaucracy. She glanced at him, and this time the smile came fully, brief but real. It faded quickly as the archive's presence intensified, beams of light scanning him from multiple angles. He felt pressure behind his eyes, a sensation like being measured not physically, but conceptually. Subject identified as Rylan Cross, the archive intoned. Species, human. Status, anomalous consort candidate. Rylan winced. That's going on my resume, isn't it? Your neural patterns exhibit instability, the archive continued. Decision-making variance exceeds acceptable parameters. That's just free will, Rylan said. We're very proud of it. The pressure eased slightly. Lineth stepped closer, her presence grounding in a way he hadn't expected. She spoke to the archive not as a supplicant, but as someone who knew its limitations. He is unaligned, she said. That is the point. A pause followed, a real one. The constructs dimmed, recalculating futures that bent unpredictably around Rylan's presence. He felt it then, a strange awareness that his existence here was distorting something vast and carefully maintained. Probability models adjust, the archive said. Instability reduced by 42%. Rylan raised an eyebrow. See? I help. They moved through the city afterward, escorted but not constrained. The architecture responded to Lineth instinctively, pathways opening, platforms forming beneath her feet. Rylan followed, occasionally tripping when the city misjudged human stride length. Sorry, the floor seemed to hum, correcting itself. I'm fine, Rylan muttered. Emotionally fragile, but fine. As they walked, Lineth explained fragments of her world, how the Empire's technology was grown from symbiotic matter, how starships bonded with navigators, how leadership was less about command and more about maintaining equilibrium. She spoke without ceremony, as if relieved to describe it to someone who did not already know every expectation attached to her words. My previous partner understood this place, she said quietly. Too well, perhaps. Rylan nodded. Sometimes understanding something completely makes it harder to change. She stopped near a balcony overlooking the central light shaft. Far below, energy flowed like a river through the heart of the city. For a moment, the weight of it pressed down on him. They believe you will change it, Lineth said, or break it. I've been accused of both, he replied, usually by people in uniform. She turned to face him fully. Do you resent me? The question caught him off guard. He considered lying, considered deflecting. Instead, he told the truth. I resent the situation, he said. I resent being used as a variable in someone else's survival equation. But you? He shook his head. No, you didn't build the cage. You just live in it. Something in her expression shifted then. Relief, perhaps, or the easing of a long-held tension. The city hummed softly around them, alive, listening. Then perhaps, Lyneth said, this will not be another loss. Rylan leaned on the railing, looking out at an empire that might collapse if he walked away, or change if he stayed. No pressure, he said lightly, just the fate of an entire civilization. She let out a quiet laugh, and for the first time, it did not sound practiced. In that moment, surrounded by living walls and watching futures rewrite themselves, Rylan realized the truth he had been avoiding since the throne room. This marriage was not about freedom, it was about choice and what it would cost to make one. The ceremony did not resemble anything Rylan had seen in human space, which was saying something, considering he once attended a diplomatic reception held inside a rotating algae tank. There were no rows of seats, no procession music, no official who looked pleased to be in charge. Instead, the chamber reshaped itself continuously, responding to the emotional state of those inside it. When tension rose, the light softened. When resolve settled, the floor steadied. Rylan suspected this was intentional and deeply unfair. He stood beside Lyneth at the center of the chamber, wearing garments grown specifically for his physiology. They fit perfectly, which unsettled him more than if they hadn't. The fabric adjusted its temperature, its weight, even its resistance to movement, as if it were politely trying not to embarrass him. I feel overdressed, he muttered, and underqualified. Lyneth glanced at him, her long ears tilting slightly in a way he had learned, meant restrained amusement. She wore ceremonial armor, light, layered, elegant rather than imposing. It framed her rather than overwhelmed her, and for the first time he understood how carefully her people balanced strength and restraint. You are not required to be qualified, she said softly, only present. That's never gone wrong in human history, he replied. The legal archives manifested above them, luminous constructs forming a slow orbit, their presence pressed into the air like gravity. Rylan felt them scanning not his body, but the space between him and Lyneth, measuring something invisible and deeply personal. Union parameters initiating, the archives intoned. Consent acknowledged under covenant law. Rylan leaned slightly toward Lyneth. Just to be clear, if this involves shared neural links, surprise offspring, or spontaneous immortality, I'd like a warning. She surprised him by laughing quietly, a real sound this time. No immortality, she said, and offspring are optional. Excellent, he said. One less thing to panic about. The ritual itself was brief, no vows spoken aloud. Instead, they placed their hands together, palms touching, and the chamber responded by projecting fragments of their lives into the air. Rylan's childhood under artificial skies. Lyneth's years walking the silent corridors of duty. The archives observed, recording, adjusting probabilities with every shared memory. When it ended, nothing exploded. No alarm sounded. The empire did not collapse immediately, which Rylan took as a promising sign. Later, much later, they found themselves alone again in Lyneth's residence. The door closed this time, not sealing, just respecting privacy. The silence between them felt different now. Heavier, but not hostile. Well, Rylan said, removing the ceremonial garment and draping it over a structure that obligingly reshaped itself into a chair. That was the strangest wedding I've ever survived. You have survived others? Lyneth asked. Only metaphorically, he said. Mostly. She sat across from him, posture relaxed in a way he hadn't seen before. Without the armor, without the archives watching, she looked younger, not inexperienced, just unguarded. I did not expect you to remain, she said quietly. He considered that, considered the escape routes he'd memorized, the offers he hadn't yet heard but knew would come. I didn't expect to stay, he admitted, but walking away felt wrong, like leaving a fire burning because it wasn't technically my problem. Lyneth studied him. You are not bound emotionally, she said. The covenant does not require it. That's good, he said. Because I'm terrible at being told how to feel. A pause settled between them, comfortable this time. Rylan, she said, testing his name as if it were something fragile. If this becomes too much, I'll tell you, he said, probably with a joke, possibly at an inappropriate moment. She smiled, slow and genuine. Outside, the city pulsed with renewed rhythm. Systems adjusted, predictions softened. Somewhere within the legal archives, probabilities rewrote themselves. Uneasy, but hopeful. Rylan leaned back, hands behind his head, staring at the living ceiling. So, he said lightly, married to an alien royal, accidentally involved in saving an empire. Think I can put this on my service record? Lineth's laughter echoed softly through the chamber, and for the first time since his capture, Rylan felt something unfamiliar settle into place. Not safety, but belonging. Tentative, complicated, and very much alive. The first sign that things were unraveling came disguised as politeness. Rylan noticed it during a council session he was technically not qualified to attend and practically unable to escape. The chamber welcomed him by adjusting the ambient light to human comfort levels, a courtesy it had never extended before. The seats reshaped themselves with exaggerated care. Even the legal archives dimmed their presence slightly, as if trying not to startle him. That's never a good sign, Rylan muttered under his breath. When systems get friendly, they're about to ask for something. Lineth sat beside him, composed but alert. He had learned to read the subtle tension in her posture, the way her long ears angled back just a fraction when she sensed danger not yet spoken. Across the chamber, Queen Visara watched them both with an expression that balanced pride and concern like a blade on its edge. The archive spoke first. Stability projections revised, they intoned. Union outcome remains favorable. However, long-term variance persists. Rylan leaned toward Lineth. They say that like it's a weather report. It is, she replied quietly. And we are the storm. The variants had a name now. Several, in fact. Dissident factions within the Empire had begun to test boundaries. Minor disruptions, delayed responses, starship collectives questioning command protocols. Nothing openly rebellious, just enough friction to remind everyone how fragile balance could be. They don't trust me, Rylan said later, pacing their residence while the walls pretended not to listen. I'm an unknown variable, a walking probability error. They trust the outcome, Lineth said. They fear the process. Comforting, he replied. I always wanted to be feared by committee. The real blow came when the archives summoned him alone. He stood beneath their orbiting light, pressure building behind his eyes as data streamed through his neural interface. This time, there was no pretense of courtesy. Subject Rylan Cross, the archives said. Anomaly impact exceeds acceptable thresholds. Emotional bonding detected. Rylan snorted. You scan my feelings? Feelings influence decision-making, the archives replied. Decision-making influences survival. So, he said, folding his arms, what's the problem? Your continued presence introduces unacceptable risk. A termination of union, voluntary departure, would restore long-term stability. The word departure echoed louder than it should have. You want me to leave, Rylan said, after everything. Yes. He laughed then, sharp and humorless. You know, on my world that's called using someone. The archives did not deny it. The offer was simple. Safe passage home. Records sealed. Lineth protected. The Empire stabilized along more predictable lines. A clean solution. Rylan asked for time. The archives granted it, confident in probability. He found Lineth standing at the balcony, watching the living city pulse beneath her. She did not turn when he approached. She already knew. They want you to go, she said. Straight to the point, he replied. I like that. Her voice remained steady, but the air between them felt fragile. If you leave, the projections improve. The Empire survives. And you, he asked. She hesitated. Just long enough. I survive, she said. I always do. That was the moment something inside him broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet fracture. The kind that changes how weight is carried forever. I was captured, Rylan said softly. Threatened. Married under duress. And somehow this is still the hardest part. Lineth finally faced him. Her eyes searched his, not for reassurance but for truth. You do not owe us martyrdom. Good, he said, because I'm terrible at dying for causes. But staying, he shrugged. Staying feels like a choice. Silence settled, heavy but honest. If you stay, she said, they will push harder. There will be conflict. He smiled, tired but real. I come from a species that argues with itself for entertainment. I think I can manage. When the archives reconvened, Ryland stood beside Lineth, hand resting lightly against hers. I'm not leaving it, he said. Adjust your models. The archives dimmed, recalculating futures that bent and twisted around stubborn human unpredictability. Instability increased, they warned. Ryland squeezed Lineth's hand gently. Or, he said, you're just afraid of change. The city hummed uneasily, alive with the sound of an empire learning that survival did not always mean control, and that some variables refused to be erased. The empire did not fracture the way the archives predicted. It shifted. The change began quietly, the most dangerous kind. Starship collectives adjusted their routes without asking permission. Administrative nodes rewrote minor protocols to accommodate human decision variants. The living city learned, slowly and stubbornly, that not every equation resolved cleanly. Raylan watched it happen from the balcony he had come to think of as familiar, hands resting on a railing that no longer corrected his posture. They're adapting, he said, reluctantly. Lineth stood beside him, her long ears angled forward, listening not just to the city's hum, but to something deeper, an absence of strain she had carried for most of her life. They have no choice, she said. The archives cannot erase you without destabilizing everything else. Never thought I'd be essential, Ryland replied. My instructors would be devastated. The final council session was not dramatic. No threats, no ultimatums. Queen Visara entered the chamber without ceremony, her posture softer than Ryland remembered from the throne hall. The archives hovered, subdued, their projections dimmed to minimal intrusion. My reign ends today, the queen said simply. Ryland blinked. That's abrupt. Visera's lips twitched. You are a disruptive influence. I get that a lot. She turned to Lineth then, not as ruler to heir, but as mother to daughter. The empire requires balance, she said, and balance requires change. I preserve stability. You will redefine it. The archives resisted briefly. Models flared, probabilities spiked, warnings layered over one another in luminous chaos. And then something unprecedented occurred. They recalibrated. Outcome variance acceptable, the archives intoned. Adaptive governance initiated. Ryland exhaled. Well, that's new. Lineth took her mother's hands, and for the first time, there was no weight of obligation in the gesture. Only choice. Only continuity reshaped rather than preserved. Leadership transitioned not with ceremony, but with relief. In the cycles that followed, the empire steadied, not because uncertainty vanished, but because it was acknowledged. Ryland became what the archives eventually labeled a stabilizing anomaly, an unpredictable presence whose refusal to follow scripted paths forced systems to remain flexible. He attended councils, offered opinions that were occasionally useful and frequently irritating, and learned when silence carried more weight than humor. Mostly. One evening, as the living city glowed softly beneath a sky threaded with artificial stars, Lineth joined him on the balcony. No armor, no insignia, just her. You could leave now, she said. No one would stop you. He considered that. The escape routes were still there. The offers, long since rescinded, no longer needed to be. I know, he said. That's the difference. She studied him, searching for the rest of the answer. I came here wanting freedom, Ryland continued. Turns out freedom isn't about leaving. It's about choosing where you stand. Lineth smiled, slow and unguarded. Then stand with me. He did. Later, much later, Ryland lay back beneath a ceiling that had learned his rhythms and no longer tried to impress him. He thought of the scout he had been, cautious, detached, ready to disappear when the mission ended. He was still capable of that. He just no longer wanted to be. Hey, he said quietly. If the archives ever decide to name an era after me, I'd like something dignified. Lyneth laughed softly. They have already recorded this period. And, she leaned closer, the age of necessary disruption. Rylan closed his eyes, smiling. I'll take it. Outside, starships moved in steady patterns, not perfect, not chaotic, alive. The Empire endured, not because it resisted change, but because it learned to live with it. And Rylan Cross, once a captive, once a bargaining tool, finally understood that some journeys did not end with escape. They ended with belonging.